Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Flinchbaugh, host of People Solve Problems, and today's guest is, well, me. I probably won't do this very often. This will be a reflection on previous podcasts and sort of what I'm learning along the way. It's really why I got into this podcast. I'd already written the book and happy to just talk about the book, perhaps, but I know there's so much more that I wanted to explore, so much more that we could all learn, that I wanted to start a series of conversations. And so I thought I would sort of pull up for a moment, just do I don't have a deliberate, very tight script for this, certainly not going to read it, but have a few notes and wanted to share some of my reflections. So we'll see how often I end up coming back to this format. Probably not often. We'll see how long it also is as we go through it. So very purposely remain very loose in how I do this, just as our most of our episodes are conversations. Well, they all are. They're conversations. There's an outline, at least some basic ideas or basic questions, but it's really a conversation with people. And we want that loose, very casual approach to having interesting conversations with very, very interesting people. So the first note I want to share. This was not a part of the original plan, but it turns out I'm recording this on the day that we're all learning that Daniel Kahneman has passed away. And so, sort of still processing this news, because he's been one of the more influential people, certainly in economics, his behavioral economics. He's considered the founding father of in many ways, but his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, and the work that came out of that has influenced so many different realms. I know I reference it quite a bit. When Jeff Grimshaw and I had the Happy Heuristics podcast, we certainly refer to that quite a bit. And I really believe, whether it's management theory, everyday practices, sports, really, there's no domain in which some of his work doesn't show up. And so I kind of think if we really had him around for another 10 years, he could really be useful at generating insights around how AI can interface in a world in which our brains really have to operate both fast and slow. And I have my own thoughts on that. I'll maybe save that for another time. But if you have been looking for a reason to read Thinking Fast and Slow, or if you've never heard of it, pick it up today. If you have heard it, it's been on your list and you just haven't gotten to it, consider this a great moment to start to pick it up. I'm not a big fan of reading books right when they're out. Interestingly, I like to kind of wait to see how useful people find them, right? Does it have a little shelf life? Because if it does, people will go back to it and it'll still be popular a year later. But boy, this is a book that will be timeless, I believe, in a lot of ways. So that's my first note, just to share a couple reflections on that. Next, I wanted to cover a quote. And a lot of the notes I want to share today are fundamentally about sort of what I've reflected on as we've had all these episodes we've had so far. I've purposely not numbered them because I just didn't felt like I needed to keep track in that way, but haven't numbered them. So I actually don't even know how many episodes we've done. But a lot of them are on reflections I've had as these conversations stimulate my thinking as it comes to the topic of people solving problems. So the first I want to share is a quote I came across that really represents a lot of my thinking. It's from a gentleman named Harrington Emerson. Most of you won't know that name, but he's really, in a lot of ways, one of the first management consultants. I don't know if he's certainly not the first, but one of the first, and don't need to go into all of his history. But the quote is this: as to methods, there may be a million and then some, but principles are few. The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods, ignoring the principles, is sure to have trouble. And, when I read this really reflected the spirit in which I attempted to write People Solve Problems. And also, going back, almost 20 years now, the spirit in which we wrote, and Andy Carlino and I wrote, The Hitchhiker's Guide to Lean. And that is that, the methods will evolve, the methods will change. There are, as Emerson said, a million of them. But fundamentally, there's core principles underneath all of that. And the idea of the mental model of first principles is, break stuff down and get to what the essence is. Get down to what is, sort of irrefutable, and you can build back up from, no matter how you got there in the first place. And I think that's pretty core to problem solving. Right? A lot of people that understand the methods without the principles struggle. They're overwhelmed by them. The methods become either a crutch or actually a hindrance. And they don't really understand the principles upon which they're trying to operate. When you understand the principles, you can fundamentally build up your own practices. You can operate with methods, without methods. You can move from one method to the next. And to me, that's been the goal all along, at least for the first half of the book, fundamentally about first principles. What are the first principles of problem solving? So that's sort of one of the reflections. And then I kind of wish I had run across this quote, because I probably would have included it in the introduction around my intent. Because absolutely it was my intent at that point, but I always find it's always interesting. You have a way to articulate it that comes after the fact. The next thing, I recently wrote a piece around how problem solving is like breathing. And this was one of my reflections fundamentally about problem solving. And it sounds kind of, a fun little way to say it, but there are a lot of aspects to where I think problem solving is inherently human. To problem solve is to be human. We do it as we are, infants. We start problem solving. We do it in our education. We do it in whatever profession that we grow into. Problem solving is human. But because it's human, and because we've done it all our lives, no matter how long we've been around, we sort of take it for granted, just like breathing. And then we find this moment where we don't always, but many people find this moment, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through sports, they find that there's actually more to breathing, that there's more that can be learned, there's more that can be done, that there's more expertise. And people learn how to breathe. And you think, hey, I'm in my 50s. Why would I learn how to breathe? Or in my 20s, I'm in my 30s, whatever it might be. But you think, why would I learn how to breathe? Well, because there's more to learn. There's more to learn about breathing. And so that's the first piece of the analogy, is that no matter how long you've been doing this, no matter how good you think you are, no matter how natural it comes to you, there is more to learn, period. It's more to learn. So continue to be curious, continue to learn more about problem solving. The other aspect of this is that we still have to be deliberate about it, right? So you could learn all this great stuff about breathing, and very rarely does it have a dramatic effect on the rest of the moments of your life, right? So you learn how to breathe through meditation or through sports and how to process more oxygen. You don't breathe sitting in a chair, walking down the street, or whatever you're doing differently. You're not doing that most of the time. And so the point is that you then have to kind of flip a switch and deliberately pay attention to your breathing. That's what half of meditation is, right? At least the doorway into it is paying attention to your breathing, because you weren't the moment before. And I think that's fundamentally true about problem solving as well. We are doing it all the time. Most of that problem solving will be inherently lazy, inherently unthinking. System one, to refer back to Daniel Kahneman. And that's fine, right? We need that rapid fire, unthinking problem solving. But whether we use tools or not, we have to still think, just like deciding to start meditating or decide to pay attention to your breathing, decide to pay attention to your approach to problem solving. Be deliberate about it. And so, again, regardless of the tool, we need to find those triggers, those moments, those realizations where in the moment we realize now is a good point to pay attention to how we're doing our problem solving. It could be in the middle of a meeting, could be in the middle of a conversation, but we have to be thoughtful about that. So problem solving is a lot like breathing. I kind of wish I had that analogy more clearly thought through when I wrote the book, but like a lot of things, you don't write a book when you're done thinking about a subject. I hope not. Maybe a lot of people do. But you write a book to clarify all that you've learned to that point and then use that as a launch pad to continue to learn. That's how books work for me. And both of the times I write them, and quite frankly, all of my writing, articles, blogs, etc. So two more thoughts I wanted to share before I wrap up this probably rather short episode. But one is that I knew this going in, that problem solving is a much wider spectrum than most people consider it. The first outline for problem solving, people solve problems, really was going to explore much more of that spectrum very deliberately. So a whole section on strategic problem solving was in the cards, or on the Post-its, quite frankly. That's how I did my initial outline. And so that was very clear to me. We needed to expand that for people. And so one of the reasons I remain sort of tool agnostic as I wrote the book, but it's amazing. Anytime you say the word problem solving, people start to think about this deliberate act where they're calling it problem solving, and not how many other things are highly intertwined with problem solving, that's what they're doing. So two episodes come to mind where we talked about this. Professor Derwent Sobek and I, longtime friend, colleague, who came on to talk about open-ended and ill-defined problems, which usually aren't said that way, but they are ugly. They have fuzzy front ends. Product development, of course, is one of the domains that Derwent is well known in, where this gets discussed, but often not in terms of problem solving, but in terms of fuzzy front end and of course the product development process. But anytime we're doing that work, a lot of it is, there's quite a bit of intuition. It might take a while, not a lot of process that drives you through it, but that's problem solving, right? You're still going back to first principles. You're still doing all of the things that you would do, just with less precision and less procedure behind it than what most people consider problem solving. Professor Josh Eric and I talked about entrepreneurship and process of discovery and sort of your business model and elements like that. Same thing, right? You're hey, I want to build a business. I want to start a business. You are solving a problem in the market. It's what you're doing. There's quite frankly no better way to say it than what you're doing. But yet we very rarely think about that's what we're doing. And so again, go back to first principles of problem solving. Are you defining the problem very well? Are you curious about cause and effect and why things work the way that they are, whether it's consumer behaviors or your product, right? These are fundamental first principles of problem solving that apply to, I want to be an entrepreneur. And another one, which we really haven't explored much on the podcast, but as I get deeper and do more research around decision-making process, first principles, methods, tools, tips, and tricks, decision-making is the other side of the coin for problem solving. Again, stuff I really wanted to explore when I first outlined the book, but if I explored everything I was going to explore, it was going to be a 600-page book. And I like reading some of those, but I definitely hesitate to pick up a 600-page book. I want to make sure before I do it. So I carved out a lot for my original outline. So again, going back to Jeff Grimshaw, our now defunct or retired podcast, maybe it's deferred, we'll see, called Happy Heuristics. We explored some of that and around decision-making and using heuristics for decision-making. And again, when you open up the world of decision-making, read authors like Andy Duke, How to Decide is an excellent book. There's lots of method to it, but there's also first principles. And a lot of those first principles relate very consistently with problem-solving first principles. And so I kind of share these elements of the wider spectrum of problem solving that I believe people are a little too blind to, unfortunately. I think when you say problem solving, people hear process, they hear methodology, and they put fairly tight walls up around those definitions and sort of fail to see what's on the other side of that wall. And I get the inclusion of a tool versus the lack of a tool is a pretty stark boundary in the spectrum of problem solving. But again, coming back to first principles, they spread that spectrum, and so I think we need to be more aware of that. The last thing I'll share is that I think, and this goes back to maybe the breathing analogy, but I think a lot of us take what we've learned around problem solving for granted. And more importantly, we take our journey, our learning journey for granted, right? Many of us have taken numerous courses around problem solving or read numerous books. And then we develop this perspective, this view, this skill, this capability, and a tool set. And then we take it for granted that we now have it. And every year, new people enter the workforce. And yeah, we train them. But I don't think we're as curious as we should be about how do we accelerate that learning curve, right? I'm several decades into my learning journey around this, and I continue to learn. So I would have liked to learn some of this. I was really fortunate that I learned a lot of stuff early on in a very deliberate way, both shoved at me and me reaching out and exploring. And so I really feel early part of my career, I was about as accelerated a learning curve as you could get just because I was soaking up every ounce of that I could find. But boy, how do we accelerate this for people? How do we get people to where I feel I am now by the time they're 30? And if they could get there, imagine where they can go next, right? Where we can take our thinking about problem solving, decision making, strategic thinking, ambiguous problems, etc. So these are some of the things that have been on my mind since I've written the book, but also since the conversations that we have on People Solve Problems have stoked my interest. I would love to hear from you first. Do you find this format interesting? I don't know how often I want to do it, how often I will do it, how often I want to do it. Both are relevant questions, but another relevant question is how often do you want me to do it? So love to hear from you. We have many guests already scheduled, more stuff coming up soon. I have a lot of episodes I'm really looking forward to recording. And fundamentally, I appreciate everyone for listening, for subscribing, for commenting. I especially appreciate my guests for coming on the show. And thank you for joining me on this continued quest for excellence, learning, mastery, if that's even achievable, in the world of problem solving, decision making, strategic thinking, etc. Be safe, be well, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the People Solve Problems podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. Visit jflinch.com for more episodes and other content. And continue to join us on your podcast app, of course. We greatly appreciate your feedback through reviews and ratings. Consider expanding your understanding of problem solving with Jamie's book, People Solve Problems: The Power of Every Person, Every Day, Every Problem. Available on Amazon. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and solving problems.